Your Ram's battery died again. You jump it, drive to the dealer, and they sell you a new battery for $400. 2 months later, it's dead again. The dealer says you need an alternator. That's another $800. You pay it. Battery still dies. Now they're talking about electrical diagnostics at $150 per hour. Stop right there. You're being fed myths that cost Ram owners thousands of dollars in unnecessary repairs. The battery isn't your problem, the alternator probably isn't either. What's killing your Ram is a combination of parasitic draws, owner habits, and design flaws that dealers ignore because they profit from repeat visits. In this video, I'm destroying 12 battery drain myths that Ram owners fall for. Each myth costs you money, time, and frustration. Stick around because myth number 1 is the biggest scam dealers run, and it's costing Ram owners $1,200 on average for a problem that costs $30 to fix. Let's dive in. Myth number 12. A good battery never dies on its own. Ram owners believe if the battery is new or expensive, it won't die randomly. Wrong. Batteries die all the time regardless of age or price because something is draining them. I've seen 1-month-old batteries go completely flat because the truck has a parasitic draw. The battery isn't defective. Something is pulling power when the truck is off. This myth costs you money because you keep replacing batteries instead of finding the actual drain. You buy a battery for $200 to $400. It dies. You assume it was bad and buy another. That one dies too. Now you've spent $800 on batteries and still have a dead truck. Here's the deal. Batteries are just storage. They hold the charge your alternator creates. If something drains that charge overnight, even the best battery goes flat. Testing the battery without testing for parasitic draw is useless. A battery can test perfect at the parts store and still die every night if your truck is pulling 500 milliamps in sleep mode. The solution? Test for parasitic draw before replacing anything. You need a multimeter. Disconnect the negative battery cable. Connect the multimeter in series between the cable and the negative terminal. Set it to measure amps. Wait 30 minutes for the truck's computers to enter sleep mode. Normal draw should be 50 milliamps or less. Anything over 100 milliamps will kill a battery overnight. Over 300 milliamps, you'll be dead in hours. Once you know there's a draw, start pulling fuses one at a time until the draw drops. That tells you which circuit is the problem. A $30 multimeter saves you from buying 3 or 4 batteries because dealers convinced you the battery was bad. Don't fall for the battery replacement scam when parasitic draw is your real problem. Myth number 11. The alternator charges the battery, so if the battery dies, the alternator must be bad. This myth sends Ram owners straight to $800 alternator replacements that don't fix anything. Here's what actually happens. The alternator produces power while the engine runs. It charges the battery and powers all electrical systems. When the engine is off, the alternator does nothing. If your battery dies overnight, the alternator isn't relevant. Something else drained the battery while the truck sat. But dealers love this myth. You bring in a dead battery. They test the alternator with the engine running and say it's weak or failing. They sell you a new alternator. The battery still dies because the alternator was never the problem. I've seen Ram owners spend $800 on alternators and $400 on batteries, and the truck still won't start after sitting overnight. That's $1,200 wasted on parts that weren't broken. Here's how to test your alternator properly. Start the truck and let it run. Measure voltage at the battery terminals with a multimeter. You should see 13.8 to 14.4 volts. That means the alternator is charging. If voltage is below 13 volts, the alternator might be weak. If voltage is above 15 volts, the voltage regulator is failing and overcharging the battery. But if voltage is normal and the battery still dies overnight, your alternator is fine. The problem is parasitic draw, not charging. Don't let a dealer sell you an alternator when the real issue is something pulling power with the truck off. Test charging voltage yourself. It takes 2 minutes and a $20 multimeter. Save the $800 alternator replacement for when the alternator actually fails. Myth number 10. Disconnecting the battery when you park prevents drain. Ram owners think disconnecting the negative cable stops all battery drain. It does, but it creates bigger problems. Every time you disconnect the battery, you reset every computer and module in the truck. The radio loses presets. The computer forgets learned fuel trims. The transmission relearns shift points. The TIPM resets and might glitch. Worse, on newer Rams with electronic features, disconnecting the battery can cause module communication errors. Some trucks won't start properly after reconnecting because modules need reinitialization. I've seen Rams stuck in limp mode because the owner kept disconnecting the battery instead of fixing the actual drain. Here's the kicker. Disconnecting the battery treats the symptom, not the cause. Your truck still has a parasitic draw. You're just hiding it by cutting power. The drain is still there. waiting to kill the battery every time you reconnect. The solution is finding and fixing the draw, not disconnecting the battery nightly. If you're disconnecting the battery as a temporary fix while you diagnose, that's fine, but don't make it permanent. You'll cause more problems than you solve. Use a battery disconnect switch if you must. These install in line with the negative cable and let you cut power without removing the cable every time. They cost $20 to $40 and prevent terminal corrosion from constant connecting and disconnecting. But again, this is a band-aid. Find the draw and fix it properly. Your RAM wasn't designed to have the battery disconnected nightly. Stop treating symptoms and fix the actual problem. Myth number 9. Aftermarket accessories don't drain batteries if they're installed correctly. This myth costs RAM owners hundreds because they trust installers who don't know how to wire properly. Aftermarket radios, light bars, winches, remote starts, and dash cams all drain batteries if installed wrong. The problem is installers tap into circuits that stay hot when the truck is off, or they don't use relays, or they wire accessories directly to the battery without fuses or switches. I've seen remote start systems drain 400 milliamps continuously. That kills a battery in 24 hours. Light bars wired without relays pull power through the switch even when off. Dash cams that don't have proper sleep modes drain batteries in 2 days. Here's what smart RAM owners do. If you install aftermarket accessories, use relays and switched power sources. Relays ensure accessories only get power when you activate them. Switched power sources shut off when the truck is off. Never tap into constant hot wires unless you absolutely need the accessory powered 24/7. For dash cams, use models with low voltage cutoff. These shut down automatically when battery voltage drops below 12.4 volts. That prevents total drain. If you're having a shop install accessories, demand they test for parasitic draw before and after installation. A good shop tests current draw with the truck off and verifies nothing changed. Shady shops install and hand you the keys without checking. Then you're stuck with a drain you can't trace. I've pulled out so many bad accessory installs that drained batteries. Owners spent $300 to $500 on installation and another $800 chasing electrical gremlins. A proper install costs the same but doesn't destroy your electrical system. Myth number 8. Cold weather kills batteries, so there's nothing you can do. RAM owners in cold climates believe dead batteries are inevitable in winter. False. Cold weather stresses batteries, but it doesn't kill them unless they're already weak or something is draining them. Here's what actually happens in cold weather. Battery chemistry slows down. Cranking power drops. A battery that delivers 800 cold cranking amps at 70 degrees might only deliver 400 amps at 0 degrees. If your battery is old or weak, that reduction prevents starting. But cold weather doesn't drain batteries. It just reveals existing problems. If your battery dies overnight in winter, you have parasitic draw. The cold made it worse, but the draw killed it. A healthy battery with no parasitic draw will start your RAM even at minus 20 degrees. It might crank slower, but it'll start. Here's the solution. Test your battery before winter. Load test it or use a battery analyzer. If it's below 80% capacity, replace it. A weak battery won't survive winter. Use a battery maintainer if your RAM sits for days without driving. Maintainers keep batteries charged with a trickle current. They prevent sulfation and extend battery life. These cost $30 to $60. Park in a garage if possible. Even an unheated garage keeps the battery 10 to 20 degrees warmer than outside. That makes a huge difference in cranking power. Don't fall for the myth that winter kills batteries. Winter exposes weak batteries and parasitic draws. Fix those problems and your RAM starts fine regardless of temperature. Myth number 7. The TIPM causes all RAM electrical problems, so replace it first. RAM owners read about TIPM failures and assume every electrical issue is TIPM related. Dealers love this myth because TIPM replacement costs $800 to $1,200. Here's the truth. The TIPM does fail, especially on 2007 to 2016 RAMs. But most electrical problems aren't TIPM failures. Corroded connections, bad grounds, failing modules, and parasitic draws cause way more issues than the TIPM. I've seen owners replace the TIPM and still have electrical problems because the TIPM wasn't the issue. Now they're out $1,200 and the truck still doesn't work right. Before replacing the TIPM, test it properly. Check for codes specific to TIPM failures. Inspect all connections to the TIPM for corrosion. Test circuits individually to see if the TIPM is controlling them correctly. Most TIPM problems trigger specific symptoms. Fuel pump relay failures cause no start conditions. Horn and wiper relays cause random activation. If you're just getting a dead battery with no other symptoms, the TIPM probably isn't your problem. Parasitic draw from a different module or accessory is more likely. Here's what costs RAM owners money. They replace the TIPM without diagnosing. The battery still dies, and now they chase other problems while $1,200 poorer. Diagnose first, replace last. If the TIPM is actually bad, replace it with a rebuilt unit with upgraded components. Companies like Flagship One rebuild TIPMs with better relays that last longer. Don't throw a $1,200 part at an electrical problem without confirming it's the cause. Test, diagnose, then replace. Myth number 6. LED upgrades save battery power. RAM owners replace halogen bulbs with LEDs thinking they'll reduce battery drain. This is partly true and partly myth. LEDs do use less power than halogens. A halogen headlight draws 55 watts. An LED draws 20 to 30 watts. That's a savings when the lights are on. But here's the catch. If you leave your lights on, you're draining the battery regardless of bulb type. LEDs just drain it slower. And some cheap LED bulbs have poor electronics that draw power even when off. I've tested LED tail lights that pulled 50 milliamps continuously because the driver circuit stayed active. That's enough to drain a battery in a week. Here's the bigger issue. RAM owners install LED light bars, rock lights, and interior lighting thinking LEDs won't drain batteries. Then they wire everything wrong, don't use switches, and wonder why the battery dies. LEDs use less power, but they still use power. Wire them properly with switches and relays. Don't run LEDs off constant hot circuits. If you're upgrading to LEDs to save battery power, you're solving the wrong problem. Fix the parasitic draw or stop leaving lights on. LEDs won't save a battery that's being drained by a module or accessory. Use LEDs for brightness and longevity, not as a battery drain solution. And if you install aftermarket LEDs, test for parasitic draw after installation. Some cheap LED drivers leak current and kill batteries. Myth number 5. A battery tender fixes parasitic draw. RAM owners plug in battery tenders and think they've solved battery drain. All you've done is add external power to compensate for the drain. The draw is still there. A battery tender or maintainer supplies a small charging current to keep the battery topped off. If your RAM has a parasitic draw, the tender fights the draw by continuously charging. That works as a temporary solution, but it doesn't fix anything. Here's what happens. The tender keeps the battery charged. You unplug it to drive the truck. The truck sits overnight. The draw kills the battery again. You're stuck with a dead battery because you relied on the tender instead of fixing the draw. Worse, some parasitic draws are high enough that a tender can't keep up. A 500 milliamp draw pulls more power than a typical tender provides. The battery still dies, just slower. I've seen RAM owners run tenders for months, masking a parasitic draw that's damaging modules or causing other problems. One guy had a door module drawing 300 milliamps continuously. The tender kept the battery charged, but the module overheated and failed. That cost $400 to replace. If he'd diagnosed the draw, the fix would have been $50 for a new door latch. Use a tender if your RAM sits for weeks between drives. That's what they're designed for. But don't use a tender to hide parasitic draw. Find the draw and fix it. Tenders cost $30 to $60. Proper diagnosis costs nothing if you do it yourself. Stop masking problems and start fixing them. Myth number 4. The dome lights drain the battery if the door doesn't close right. RAM owners check dome lights first when batteries die. They assume a door isn't closing completely and the light stays on. Sometimes that's true. Usually it's not. Dome lights draw 5 to 10 watts. That's about 0.5 amps at 12 volts. To kill a battery overnight, the light would need to stay on for 10 to 15 hours. That's possible, but unlikely unless you're parking for days. And most RAMs have a battery saver feature that shuts off dome lights after 10 to 15 minutes. Even if a door isn't closing right, the lights shut off automatically. Here's the kicker. RAM owners waste time checking dome lights and door switches while ignoring real parasitic draws from modules, accessories, or failing components. I've diagnosed trucks where the owner swore the dome light was the problem. We tested it. The light was off. The real draw was a glove box light that stayed on continuously because the switch failed. 300 milliamps, enough to kill the battery in 30 hours. Another truck had a failed BCM that pulled 400 milliamps in sleep mode. The owner blamed dome lights for 2 months before finally getting proper diagnostics. Check your dome lights if you want, but don't stop there. Test for parasitic draw properly. Pull fuses and measure current. Find the actual problem instead of guessing. Dome lights are the most overdiagnosed cause of battery drain. They're rarely the issue on Rams with battery saver features. Myth number 3, you need expensive dealer diagnostics to find battery drain. Dealers charge $150 to $200 per hour for electrical diagnostics. Ram owners think that's the only way to find parasitic draw. Completely false. You can diagnose battery drain yourself with a $30 multimeter and basic knowledge. Here's the process. Set your multimeter to measure DC amps. Most multimeters have a 10 amp setting and a milliamp setting. Start with 10 amps. Disconnect the negative battery cable. Connect the multimeter in series between the cable and the negative terminal. Red lead to the cable, black lead to the terminal. Turn on the multimeter. You'll see current flow. This is your total parasitic draw. Wait 30 minutes. Rams take time to enter sleep mode. Modules shut down one by one. After 30 minutes, check the reading. If it's above 100 milliamps, you have excessive draw. Now start pulling fuses one at a time from the fuse box. When you pull a fuse and the current drops significantly, you've found the circuit causing the draw. Check what's on that circuit and test components individually. This process costs nothing except time. You don't need dealer diagnostics. You need a multimeter and patience. I've found parasitic draws in 15 minutes using this method. Dealers take your truck for 2 days and charge $400 to tell you the same thing. Some draws are tricky and require advanced diagnostics, but 90% of parasitic draws are simple. A module that won't sleep, an accessory wired wrong, or a failing component. You can find these yourself. Don't pay a dealer $400 when you can diagnose it for free in your driveway. Myth number 2. Battery drain only happens in older Rams with electrical problems. Ram owners think new trucks don't have battery drain issues. Wrong. Parasitic draw affects Rams from 2002 to 2025. Newer Rams actually have more potential for parasitic draw because they have more modules, more computers, and more features. Every module in your Ram uses power, even when off. They're supposed to enter sleep mode and draw minimal current, but modules fail. Software glitches. Updates cause problems. I've seen brand new Rams with factory-installed accessories that drain batteries. Remote start systems that pull 200 milliamps continuously. Bed lighting that doesn't shut off. Infotainment modules that won't sleep. One 2023 Ram 1500 came from the factory with a BCM software issue that prevented sleep mode. The truck pulled 800 milliamps continuously. The battery died after 12 hours of sitting. The dealer tried replacing the battery twice before finally updating BCM software. Another 2022 Ram 2500 had an aftermarket spray and bed liner installed at the dealer. The installer damaged a wire harness. That caused a short that drained 400 milliamps. The owner fought battery drain for a month before finding the damaged wire. Newer Rams aren't immune to battery drain. They're more susceptible because of complexity. More modules mean more failure points. More features mean more things to drain power. If you own a new Ram and the battery dies, don't assume it's normal or the battery is bad. Test for parasitic draw. New trucks should have 50 milliamps or less in sleep mode. Anything higher is a problem. Myth number 1. Replacing the battery with a bigger one solves drain problems. This is the most expensive myth Ram owners fall for. You have parasitic draw. The battery dies every few days. Instead of fixing the draw, you buy a bigger battery with more cold cranking amps and reserve capacity. The bigger battery lasts longer between charges, so you think you solved the problem. You didn't. You just gave the parasitic draw more power to consume. Here's what actually happens. A standard Ram battery is 730 to 800 cold cranking amps with 120 to 140 minutes reserve capacity. You upgrade to a 1000 CCA battery with 180 minutes reserve. That battery costs $300 to $500 depending on the brand. Now, instead of the battery dying in 2 days, it dies in 4 days. You bought yourself 2 extra days. The parasitic draw is still there, still pulling power, still damaging components that are staying energized when they shouldn't be. Worse, some Ram owners install dual batteries or add a second battery in the bed. That's $600 to $1,000 in batteries and hardware. The draw kills both batteries. Now you're jumping 2 batteries instead of 1. I've seen this so many times. Owner spends $500 on a premium AGM battery. It dies in a week. He's convinced the battery is defective. Buys another $500 battery. Same thing. Now he's $1,000 deep in batteries and still has a dead truck. The real problem was a 300 milliamp draw from a failed module. Fixing that module costs $200. He could have spent $200 and solved it. Instead, he spent $1,000 on batteries and still needs to fix the module. Don't upgrade your battery to compensate for parasitic draw. That's like buying a bigger gas tank because your truck has a fuel leak. Fix the leak. Find the draw. Pull fuses, test modules, check accessories. A $30 multimeter finds the problem. A $500 battery just delays the inevitable. Stop throwing money at symptoms and fix the cause. These 12 myths cost Ram owners thousands of dollars in unnecessary repairs. Dealers and parts stores profit from owners who don't understand parasitic draw and electrical systems. They sell batteries, alternators, TIPMs, and diagnostics that don't fix the real problem. Your Ram's battery drain isn't mysterious. It's not random. It's a measurable electrical draw that you can find and fix with basic tools and knowledge. Stop believing myths that cost you money. Test your truck properly. Find the actual problem. Fix it once and move on. A $30 multimeter and 30 minutes of testing beats $1,200 in parts you don't need. Don't let myths destroy your wallet.